Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Do you know the Russian winter is sometimes called General Frost? Because it has helped Russia and the Soviet Union in many wars. As we speak, Moscow is fighting a war in Ukraine. It has a clear advantage. And at this rate, this may be the final winter of the war. Because on the other side of it is Donald Trump, ready to force Ukraine to the talking table and stop unconditional aid. Tonight, we'll look at the latest developments that give Russia the edge and pose challenges for Europe and Kiev. In China, the military purge continues. Another top official has been suspended. We'll look at what this means for Xi Jinping's military and the neighborhood. From banning Trump from Facebook to dining with him at Mar-a-Lago, what explains Mark Zuckerberg's U-turn and how big tech is making this political shift in the US? Why China is offering 300% salary hikes to tech talent from the West? Why Mohammad Yunus may not have been the best choice for Bangladesh, why Khalida Zia's party, the BNP, is also opposing the arrest of the Hindu priest there. How 62 countries came together to intercept tons of drugs. Why France is giving mixed signals on the ICC arrest warrant against Benjamin Netanyahu. Why Europe is divided over a deal with South America and what lies ahead for the mainstream media that faces a credibility crisis. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Israel and Hezbollah accuse each other of violating the Lebanon ceasefire. Israel launches several strikes in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah says people returning to their homes were attacked. The flare-up comes less than 48 hours after the ceasefire was announced. China's military conducts patrols around a contested South China Sea shoal, says it will, and I'm quoting, resolutely defend its national security. Beijing claims the waters around Scarborough Shoal, which it seized from the Philippines in 2012, the new patrols come amid rising tensions with Manila. Romania's top court orders a recount for the presidential election. This move comes after the win by far-right candidate Călin Georgescu. His victory raised concerns over Romania's electoral process. He is set to face a centrist leader in a runoff next month. Australia passes landmark law banning social media for those under the age of 16. Social media platforms face a fine of $32 million for not complying. Tech giants call this new law vague and problematic. Australia's ban is a world first. And South Korea battles its second day of heavy snowfall. 5 people were killed in the cold snap. Hundreds of flights remain cancelled. Schools and other operations suspended. This is Seoul's third heaviest snowfall in 120 years. It's the third winter of Russia's war on Ukraine and possibly the most decisive one. Usually winters bring snow and frost, but this time it's also bringing Donald Trump. He has promised to end the fighting on day one in office. So Russia is punching hard. Overnight, they launched a massive air attack. Some 90 missiles and 100 drones were fired. Military and industrial sites across the country were targeted in Kharkiv, in Donetsk, in Odessa, in Dnipro. It was basically a nationwide attack by Russia. People reported air raid sirens across major cities in Ukraine. They bunkered in subways and shelters as Russian missiles flew overhead. And damages? Ukraine says 79 out of the 91 missiles were shot down. So were 35 of the 100 drones. The remaining hit Ukraine's energy infrastructure. We are mainly talking about power plants. They were hit. If these plants go offline, Ukraine will not have electricity, and that too as winter sets in. No home heating, no lighting, no warm water. The idea behind these strikes is to break Ukraine's morale. In fact, some power plants have reported damages from these Russian strikes. It has left 1 million Ukrainians without power. That's almost 3% of their population. It is close to 0 degrees Celsius in Ukraine today. Imagine 1 million people without power in such cold. And it will only get worse from here, the cold at least. Now, this strategy is not new. Russia did the same during previous winters as well. They targeted Ukraine's power plants. But this time, two things are different. One, this winter leads to Donald Trump's inauguration. And two, Russia has a firm upper hand. Let's take a closer look at these factors. Trump has nominated a special envoy for Russia and Ukraine. He's a retired general named Keith Kellogg. And what's his stance on the war? A bit more nuanced than Donald Trump. Kellogg says aid should be conditional on talks, meaning if Ukraine wants weapons, they must join the peace talks. Now, let's assume that they do, but Russia refuses. Then what happens? Then Kellogg says the US should give aid to Ukraine. So it's a slightly different position from Donald Trump's, but chances are Putin will take it. Anything other than Joe Biden's unconditional support is a win for Russia. Which brings us to the second factor. Russia is making huge gains on the ground, which is very different from last year. In 2023, Russia captured just 460 square kilometers of Ukrainian land. 460. It was virtually a stalemate. And this year, Russia has captured around 2,700 square kilometers, 2,700 square kilometers. This is 6 times more than last year. Now, put these two factors together. Russia capturing more land and Trump returning to the White House. It tells you why Joe Biden and Ukraine are getting desperate. Earlier this month, Biden took a major step. He allowed Ukraine to use American missiles to strike inside Russia. Zelensky was clearly pumped about it. He launched a missile volley almost immediately. But Vladimir Putin one-upped him. He fired an intermediate-range ballistic missile at Ukraine, a nuclear-capable weapon, and he is not done yet. Putin says the next target could be Ukraine's decision-making centers.
As has already been said, we will respond to the ongoing strikes on Russian territory by Western-made long-range missiles, including by possibly continuing to test the Orshnik in combat conditions, as was done on November 21st. At present, the Ministry of Defense and the General Staff of the Russian Army are selecting targets to hit on Ukrainian territory. These could be military facilities, defense industry enterprises, or decision-making centers in Kyiv.
Basically, government buildings. That's what Russians will target, he says. Most of them are located in the capital, Kiev. Now, Russia has not attacked such buildings yet in this war, but Putin says they could be targeted going forward. It's a clear warning against escalation. But will Zelensky listen to him? He's evidently worried about the missile attacks because Ukraine's air defenses are weak. They can shoot down drones and short-range projectiles, but ballistic missiles, Ukraine is helpless against them.
Mark Rutte and I discussed the available response capabilities, the necessary strengthening of Ukraine's air defense. I named the specific air defense systems that we need, which can work. The recent authorization for long-range strikes on military facilities in Russia helped. But the pressure on Russia must be maintained and increased at different levels, so that Russia feels what war is.
Joe Biden shares these concerns, but he's running out of ways to help. He's already lifted the ban on Western long-range missiles so Ukraine can fire them on Russia. Biden has also given Kiev controversial landmines. What more can he do? Well, reports say that he is preparing another military aid package. This one is worth around $725 million. We're talking about attack drones, Stinger missiles, HIMARS rocket systems, and guided rockets. All of this is coming from the U.S. military stockpile. It's part of a package already authorized by the U.S. Congress. All Biden needs to do is sign it. He's also asking Ukraine to recruit more soldiers. Right now, only men over 25 years of age are fighting in this war. Washington says reduce that to 18. All men over 18 should be fighting this war. It clearly shows that Ukraine is outmanned in this fight. European countries are also making moves. Yesterday, leaders from the Nordic, the Baltic and Poland met in Sweden. They promised to increase military aid for Ukraine. But Putin has a plan for them too. Europe has recently reported a string of strange incidents, parcel bombs, flight threats, cyber attacks and sabotage. Experts believe that Russia could be behind them. Some Western allies are asking for a strong response, like Germany. Germany says that Russia is launching hybrid attacks, and this could trigger NATO's self-defense clause. Remember, that's the pillar of NATO. What does the clause say? If one country is attacked, all of them will respond together. Germany says that Russia's hybrid attacks and sabotage should trigger the NATO clause. We haven't heard from other NATO members yet, but frankly, it's a tall ask. Is NATO really going to attack Russia over broken internet cables or over a cyber attack on airports? It sounds a bit far-fetched. More so since Donald Trump is now taking charge. He is famously not a fan of NATO. If Trump keeps his word, this could be the last winter of fighting. It's truly a desperate period for Ukraine. Not only are they being forced to the negotiating table, they are being forced at their weakest moment. China's military remains in turmoil and it is getting messier by the day. We're talking about the PLA, the People's Liberation Army. That's what the Chinese army is called. They're witnessing a massive purge. Their top brass is under fire. Yesterday, we told you about Admiral Dong Jun. He's the defense minister of China. I'm not sure for how long, though, because he's believed to be facing a probe for corruption. It's hard to say what awaits him. As of today, Beijing is loudly denying all the stories about him, and yet something doesn't add up. Today, a top PLA officer was suspended. His name is Admiral Miao Hua.
Miao Hua, a member of the Central Military Commission and director of the Political Work Department of the CMC, is suspected of a serious breach of discipline and has been suspended for inspection by the party's Central Committee.
Miao held a powerful position in China's military establishment. It's hard to say that with a straight face. Admiral Miao was the member of the CMC, the Central Military Commission. This is China's top decision-making body on military matters. It is chaired by Xi Jinping himself. Now, Admiral Miao was a close ally of the Chinese president. It was well known in the Chinese establishment. Miao served in the Chinese forces in Fujian, and guess who else served there? Xi Jinping. In the 1990s and early 2000s, Xi was Fujian's governor. So they go back a long way. But it seems that the old connection could not save this admiral. China announced the action against him today. I have a copy of that statement. This is what it said, and I'm quoting. The ruling Chinese Communist Party has decided to suspend Miao Hua from duty pending investigation. Investigation for what? What are the charges against him? What is this admiral being accused of? As usual, Beijing has not revealed much. The official line is this: Miao committed serious violations of discipline. It's a common euphemism for corruption in China, violations of discipline. And this has been the pattern for the past couple of years. A military officer first disappears, then they are removed from their post. A carefully worded announcement follows, where Beijing provides no specifics, and the military officer in question is purged. Do you know how many of them have been removed in this way? At least 16 since last year. All of them held senior positions in the Chinese military, 16 top officials. This list includes 2 former defense ministers, 5 officers from China's rocket force, and 2 more from the PLA's equipment department. This department, as the name suggests, equips the Chinese military. Earlier this year, some more details came to light. They were about Wei Fenghe and Li Shangfu, the two former defense ministers who were axed. Apparently, both had taken bribes. They were accused of setting a bad example. But the way this is going, it seems the entire military leadership is setting a bad example in China. And this is spiraling a full-blown scandal. Just how deep does corruption run in the PLA? How far has the rot spread? Even Xi Jinping may not have the answers. He has set up a special group of investigators to probe corruption in the military. It will report directly to the Central Military Commission. Apparently, the cleanup is far from over. More officers could be targeted in the days ahead, which brings us back to China's defense minister, Admiral Dong Jun. The third defense minister in 2 years to face a corruption probe. China has rubbished this, though.
The report is pure fabrication, and its perpetrators are ill-intentioned. China expresses its strong dissatisfaction with such slanderous behavior.
That was a spokesperson for China's defense ministry. But where is the minister himself? Why can't he address these allegations directly? The world is waiting to hear from him, including the United States, which is not convinced by China's denials. The US too believes that Admiral Dong, the defense minister, is being investigated. Now let's join the dots. China's defense minister is missing. He has been accused of corruption. 2 defense ministers before him were found to be corrupt. In 1 year, 16 senior military officers have been purged. Does the PLA have a stable command and control structure? Who is even leading this military? Xi Jinping has removed the top brass, so who is left to lead the PLA? And this has been going on for years, by the way. Ever since Xi Jinping took power, the PLA has opened 4,000 cases. 4,000 only in the military. More than 100 high-level military officials have been removed. And the president is not done yet. Can any military function effectively amid such chaos in the ranks? Xi Jinping is not only triggering this chaos, he's also pushing his army into adventurism. He's escalating tensions with Taiwan. A few days ago, Taipei spotted 2 Chinese spy balloons. Reports say China is also planning a major drill around the island. Beijing is angry with Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te, who is heading to the Pacific with a stop in the United States. Today, Beijing issued a warning to Washington.
We urge the U.S. side to abide by the One China principle and the provisions of the 3 China-U.S. joint communiques, refrain from sending any wrong signals to the forces of Taiwan independence, and take practical actions to safeguard China-U.S. relations and peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait.
So tensions are rising in the Taiwan Strait. Then we have China's border with India. Both sides recently disengaged from the remaining flashpoints, but a full de-escalation is still pending. Now, India and China have a considerable presence of troops and military hardware on the front lines. The PLA is stretched thin, and it is gripped by internal turmoil. This is a tricky situation, not just for China, but also for its neighbors. Even one misstep can prove to be one too many. They must remain vigilant. It's been 3 weeks since Donald Trump was elected. Since then, he spent most of his time in Florida at his luxury resort called Mar-a-Lago. On Wednesday, he was joined by a special guest, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg traveled all the way to Florida to meet with Donald Trump, also with members of the upcoming administration. He even joined the president-elect for dinner. And Meta spokesperson has confirmed this meeting. They said Zuckerberg, and I'm quoting, Zuckerberg was grateful for the invitation. So it sounds like a friendly get-together. But the men in question have not been friendly. Trump and Zuckerberg have no love lost. This story begins in 2016, the first time when Trump was elected. It blindsided America's big tech. Silicon Valley was always seen as a progressive bastion. They ended up clashing with Trump. Their initial response was resistance. Google CEO Sundar Pichai joined anti-Trump protests. Big tech worked with the Democrats. Meta tightened its moderation policies. Editorial nudging was the go-to tool, but this strategy backfired. Trump and his supporters rallied against this bias, and big tech got a bad name. Zuckerberg, too, was part of this campaign. In 2020, he donated $400 million to support America's electoral infrastructure. The Trump campaign did not take it well. They called it election interference. In 2021, Meta banned Trump. He was taken off Facebook and Instagram. This was after the January 6 Capitol riots. The ban was lifted after 2 years, but Trump was not ready to forgive and forget. In fact, he escalated matters earlier this year. He said Zuckerberg would find himself in prison if he tries to interfere with this election. Trump's stance softened only in July. That's when he survived an assassination attempt. Zuckerberg called up Trump personally after that, and he called him badass. The Meta CEO still did not endorse Trump, but the thaw had begun. In October, Trump said it was nice of Zuckerberg to stay out of the election. And now the two men are dining together. So from frenemy to dinner guest, it's quite the changing dynamic, and Zuckerberg is not alone. Big tech has gone from hating on Trump to wooing him. Google CEO Sundar Pichai, Apple CEO Tim Cook, Amazon owner Jeff Bezos, they've all signaled a détente. They courted Trump ahead of the election. They tried to build a rapport. And all of this was going on behind the scenes. They may not have publicly backed Donald Trump, but they were preparing to work with him. The reason is quite simple, of course. It's self-interest. What does a business gain by picking a fight with a president? In his first term, Trump was critical of big tech. The impact was felt by several companies. Take Amazon, for example. The Pentagon cancelled a deal with Amazon. Amazon said Trump was behind this cancellation. Why? Because Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, also owns the Washington Post. And the Post was not kind to Trump. So this time, big tech is treading with caution. In fact, in the run-up to this election, Bezos forced the Washington Post to drop their endorsement of Kamala Harris. And now Donald Trump has won. The Silicon Valley giants cannot wish him away. So they're trying to work with him, trying to figure out what his stance on big tech will be this time. Look at his FCC chair appointment. FCC is the Federal Communications Commission. It is the U.S. communications regulator. Donald Trump has tapped Brendan Carr for this role. He is a Republican who has been slamming big tech. He wants to dismantle the so-called censorship cartel. And that's not good news for Silicon Valley. So they don't want to be caught off guard, which is why these constant phone calls, the meetings at Mar-a-Lago, they want to befriend Donald Trump. But their battle is only for the second place, because the first place belongs to Elon Musk. He too owns a social media platform. He too did not see eye to eye with Donald Trump in the past, but he changed tack way before other big tech companies. This election, he went all in for Trump. Musk donated more than $100 million to the Trump campaign. He endorsed Trump on X. He was with him on election night. In fact, they're so close that many call Elon Musk the first buddy. And Musk is reaping the benefits. He will head the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, which gives him a lot of influence. And that may worry Mark Zuckerberg, because he may be dining with Trump, but he has a long-standing rivalry with Musk. The two men wanted to battle it out in a cage fight. Alas, it never happened, this much touted battle of the billionaires. As for Donald Trump, it did not take him a bout to get big tech to bend the knee. He did it with just an election win. For our next story, let me ask you a question. What is China best known for? Chances are you'll say exports. Their products are cheap, mass-produced, and often copied from the West. China has a reputation for this. Counterfeiting consumer products. They copy everything. The strategy has served them well so far, but it has its limits. And China is now discovering those limits. It is trying to make high-tech products. The West is blocking access to the know-how, so Chinese companies are facing gaps. They cannot copy what they don't have access to. So Beijing has come up with a new plan. Poach Western talent. If you can't get the products and the tech, get the people who are making them. And for this, China is setting up international offices. They're wooing top talent with lucrative offers. And when I say lucrative, I mean a 300% salary hike. Basically, Chinese companies are throwing big money, they're tripling salaries, and this is designed for a certain kind of workers, those who work in the tech space in fields like semiconductors and artificial intelligence. This talent is in very high demand and the supply is limited, so China is turning to the world's top technology hubs like Taiwan, which is a leading chip manufacturer, or the Silicon Valley, which is home to some of the world's top tech companies, and also parts of Europe like Germany and the Netherlands. And leading this effort is China's tech giant Huawei. It is trying to poach from companies like ASML. ASML is a Dutch company. It manufactures machines which produce chips. Now, ASML is the best in the business. It's a market leader with a near monopoly. ASML machines make the world's most advanced semiconductors. You cannot do without them. Now, China cannot buy these machines because Western powers have restricted ASML. The company is barred from selling machines to China or to Chinese companies like Huawei. So Beijing is resorting to the next best thing. It is poaching the talent that built these machines. It's a time-tested strategy. Poaching is how companies get access to trade secrets, insider knowledge, and rare skill sets. But this is not just a corporate game. Companies like Huawei are not just businesses, they are an extension of the Chinese state. And they are pursuing foreign workers aggressively. Reports say many of these people have got several calls, emails, even messages on LinkedIn to discuss job offers. We don't know how successful Huawei has been, but the West and its allies are on guard and they're trying to stop this poaching from China. Taiwan, for example, has put strict rules in place. It closely monitors recruitment by Chinese companies. South Korea, too, is changing its laws. It wants to enforce tough punishments and block transfer of any sensitive know-how. The US and Europe are also stepping up. They have mobilized their intelligence agencies. Despite all of this, the Chinese are making progress in the tech space. Earlier this month, Huawei unveiled a new phone, the Mate 70. It runs on Huawei's own software. Earlier, they relied heavily on Western technology. Their phones use the Android software, which is made by Google. Many components also came from Western suppliers, but now Huawei is phasing them out.
But this is about self-sufficiency. All of this, everything you see here when you open up a smartphone and see 90% of the chips, 80% of the chips, whatever, are made by Chinese manufacturers. This is all about self-sufficiency, the ability to create the theory behind the technology and then implement it and manufacture on a commercial scale is what this is about. What this friction between East and West is about.
Beijing is driving this shift with heavy incentives. Chip making is a top priority for them. China has invested nearly $100 billion on it. This is in the form of subsidies and policy benefits. It is boosting the local semiconductor industry. The goal is quite simple, to build machines that rival those made by ASML. And how close is China to achieving this goal? Experts say it could take them at least 5 years to bridge the gap, to get to the same level as ASML. And despite the best efforts of the United States, Beijing is making strides by hook or by crook. China's poaching strategy shows its determination. It wants to dethrone the US and win the tech war. Our next story is about OTP, one-time password. If you haven't used it, you're living under a rock. An OTP is a 4 or 6-digit number, a unique verification code, a security feature that is used to authenticate a user's identity. Banks, e-commerce, even government authorities use OTPs. Do you know how many OTPs are generated in India every day? Up to 1 billion. 1 billion OTPs a day. That alone could have been our story, but it's not. We are talking about OTPs tonight because reports said that they may be stopped. No more OTPs, thanks to a new rule by India's telecom regulator. So what is this new rule? And will you not receive OTPs from December 1st? Our next report tells you.
We live in a digital world where one click, one swipe could be the difference between safety and chaos. Amid all of this, a silent guardian has emerged. A fleeting sequence of digits trusted by billions but lasting only seconds. It's the one-time password. OTP was once the dream of unbreakable security. But now, it's the armor for billions across the globe. So how does it work? The process itself is quite simple. During a transaction or login, you have to enter your mobile number. Once you do, the system gets a request. It generates a unique one-time password. You input that code, and once it matches the code in the system, you're allowed to proceed. It's like getting the right key for the magic door. OTPs have taken over the globe. But its story would be incomplete without India, where this silent guardian found its ultimate calling. Nearly 1.7 billion messages are sent every single day in the country. By some estimates, 1 billion of them are OTPs. Aadhaar verification, UPI payments, e-governance, bank transactions, even booking movie tickets. Everything needs an OTP. It isn't just a security measure, it's become a way of life. But no hero is without its challenges. As the OTP grew stronger, its enemies became smarter. OTP scams have skyrocketed in the recent years, and so have the emergence of spam OTPs. So India's telecom regulator came up with a solution. The TRAI, or Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, asked telecom companies to ensure message traceability. What does that mean? Basically, telecom companies had to register principal institutions, your banks, e-commerce companies, other financial institutions. After that, they had to ensure that OTP messages are traceable from the principal institutions to the recipients. If it couldn't be traced, the system would reject it. Basically, customers wouldn't get the OTP. The move is to weed out scammers and spam messages. The deadline was December 1st, but the telecom companies argue the process is cumbersome. They would need more time to implement it. The TRAI had pushed the deadline before, but they didn't say anything this time. So it left customers worried. Would they not receive OTPs anymore? Well, the TRAI has now issued a clarification. It says OTPs will come in without any delays. So basically, there's nothing to worry about, at least for now. The telecom companies will have to update their infrastructure in the coming days. But for now, it will be business as usual. You will receive the OTP. It will be valid for fleeting minutes. And for that time, it will stand watch over your digital activity.
Let's turn to Bangladesh now, where the interim ruler is under the pump. You may remember when Mohammad Yunus was chosen to lead Bangladesh. Chosen, not elected. The students were happy. The political parties were happy, the West was happy, and so was the civil society. 4 months on, it's pretty clear why. All these stakeholders have gained from Yunus's weakness, from his inability to steady Bangladesh. The students have plum cabinet positions. The radical Islamists are out of jail. And the political parties are rid of Sheikh Hasina. The only loser? The ordinary people of Bangladesh, especially Hindus and other minorities. So a lot of people are asking the obvious question, was Yunus the right guy for the job? Let's look at 2 points here. First is the election. Yunus has been in power for more than 100 days now, yet he refuses to set a date for elections in Bangladesh. He says, let's complete the reforms first, then we'll hold the elections. There are obvious problems with such a position. Why should an unelected regime implement reform? Shouldn't the new Bangladesh be created by popular will? Also, deadlines speed up important work. Not setting a deadline suggests that you have no intention of completing it. So that's the first point about elections. Second is law and order. Frankly, that should have been Yunus's first priority, to get control of the streets. Instead, look what he's done. What did he do? He lifted the ban on Jamaat-e-Islami, a radical Islamist group / wannabe political party. He released terror suspects jailed by Sheikh Hasina, and he went after Bangladesh's founding legacy. Talk about misplaced priorities. Yunus should have been focused on Bangladesh's future, but he's obsessed over its past. And look at the result. Students attacking each other, Islamists attacking minorities, and a diplomatic tussle with Dhaka's most important neighbor, India. And here's the best part. Yunus has done the impossible. He has put Sheikh Hasina and the Bangladesh Nationalist Party on the same page. That's right. Hasina released a statement today. First, listen to this.
I appeal to the people of the country to stand united against this kind of terrorism and militancy. Religious freedom and security of life and property must be ensured for people of all communities.
So she's condemned the street violence. She's also called for unity. Now listen to the BNP's top leader.
I would like to say that we should not create division. We must move forward utilizing this opportunity, keeping our unity intact. We hope that no such situation arises again to create a division among people.
So the BNP is making the same call for unity. We understand why Hasina is against Yunus, but why the BNP? Their leaders met Mohammed Yunus yesterday. They shared their concerns on a number of issues, like the violence on the streets, the fights between colleges, and the ISKCON row. The BNP is against the recent arrest of a Hindu priest. You haven't heard me wrong. The BNP is opposing this arrest. They say vested interests created the sedition charges, and they're calling for a free and transparent investigation. Well, what's happened to them? Two factors are at play here. Number one, the BNP clearly sees itself as the rulers in waiting. But the ground reality is quite different. Reports say Yunus is leaning into Jamaat leaders and advisors. He met the Jamaat chief earlier today. Plus, the BNP's ground presence has waned. Experts say the Jamaat has moved into the vacuum created by Hasina's exit. Simply put, Jamaat is the power behind Yunus's throne. That's factor number one. Number two, India. It's impossible for New Delhi to reach out to Jamaat, but it has reached out to the BNP. And since then, their leaders have changed their tune. Let me give you an example. We just told you about the Hindu priest arrested for sedition, Chinmoy Krishna Das. Do you know who filed that case against him? A local BNP leader. But the story gets interesting. BNP actually expelled that leader for filing this complaint. It's not a smoking gun, but it certainly raises some questions. All we know for sure is that Bangladesh is at a crossroads. You need strong and able leadership to pick the right path. But Mohammed Yunus does not look like that leader. Our next story has the trappings of a Hollywood thriller. Picture this: 62 countries sharing intelligence, pooling together warships and planes, joining hands for a 6-week-long operation, which has a cool name, by the way. Operation Orion. It has successfully created history with the biggest ever drug bust. Authorities have uncovered a new drug trafficking route. They have intercepted 6 semi-submersible vessels. In other words, narco subs, stuffed with, and listen to this, 1,400 tons of drugs. 1,400 tons of drugs worth $8.5 billion. We bring you the play-by-play of this operation and tell you why it matters. Here's a report.
It all started with the 6-week-long Operation Orion. 62 countries joined hands, including Colombia, Australia, the US, and several European nations. Their governments came together. They pooled together helicopters, aeroplanes, and frigates. They shared intelligence, and together they have made history in anti-narcotics operations. They arrested more than 400 people in the crackdown. They intercepted illegal shipments of drugs. They halted 6 semi-submersible vessels stuffed with 1,400 tons of drugs, worth $8.5 billion. This is a world record for any single anti-narcotics operation. What did the haul include? More than 1,000 tons of marijuana and 225 tons of cocaine. This is a historic success, but what makes it more significant is that the authorities have uncovered a new drug trafficking route by intercepting what are often called narco-submarines. These vessels are 10 to 25 meters long. They sit low in the water, so they're barely visible as they skim the ocean while carrying tons of cocaine. One of these Colombian narco-subs was bound for Australia. It was halted near a tiny, uninhabited French coral reef in the Pacific. Colombian drug traffickers regularly ship cocaine to Australia, thanks to the sky-high demand for the drug in the country. 1 kilogram of the drug can go as high as $240,000. That's about 6 times the average price in the US. Traffickers send these drugs concealed in cargo ships, and they don't dare send more than 50 kgs of it. But this is the first time that a sub was found transporting tons of cocaine and sailing to Oceania. It bypassed ports and anti-narcotics checks. The boat set sail from Tumaco, which is a port city in Colombia's Pacific coast. It planned to complete a 4,000-mile journey directly to Australia. Intercepting this narco sub was one of the biggest breakthroughs of the bust. It cuts into billions of dollars worth of drug cartel income and exposes their new trafficking methods. The international cooperation for this operation is a turning point for anti-narcotics ambitions. It shows that authorities can keep up with this ever-evolving drug trafficking game of cat and mouse.
Now let's look at France. The country is riding high right now. It just had a major diplomatic victory, the recent ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. France was praised for its role in it, for mediating with Lebanon and pushing the ceasefire deal through. Paris was basking in praise, and it decided to use this goodwill as a cover to make a controversial statement. A statement about the ICC, the International Criminal Court. But before we get to that, let's give you some background. The ICC issued arrest warrants last week for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister of Israel Yoav Gallant. The court said that they may have committed war crimes in Gaza and that Israel used starvation as a method of warfare. It committed various crimes against humanity, hence the arrest warrants against the Prime Minister and the former Defense Minister. That was this case. What does this warrant mean? The ICC does not have a police force, so who will arrest them? Member countries. All countries that are party to the ICC, they now have an obligation to arrest Netanyahu and Gallant. If they enter your territory, you arrest them and send them to The Hague, which is the headquarters of the ICC. That's where they will be tried, and the court will decide if they are guilty. So that is the current status of the ICC case. Where does France figure in this? France is a signatory to the ICC. This court has 125 countries as signatories. France is one of them. So it is obligated to arrest Netanyahu and Gallant. But Paris doesn't want to. It's been sending mixed signals since the warrants came out. This was the French foreign minister yesterday trying to pull off a balancing act.
Benjamin Netanyahu is now the subject of an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity. If the Israeli Prime Minister were to set foot on French soil, concretely, and without political cant, would he be arrested?
France will apply, as always, international law which is based on its obligations to cooperate with the International Criminal Court, obligation with regard to its adherence to the Rome Statute which provides for, and which deals with questions of immunity on some leaders. In any event, it is ultimately up to the judicial authority to decide.
He said France would cooperate with the ICC. Then he mentioned something about immunity. And then he brushed it all off by saying that it was up to the judicial authorities. It sounded like he was looking for an excuse to not arrest the Israeli leaders. Then, later in the day, the French Foreign Ministry put out this notice. I'll read the operative part for you. A state cannot be required to act inconsistently with its obligations under international law with respect to the immunities of states not party to the ICC. Such immunities apply to Prime Minister Netanyahu and other ministers concerned and will have to be taken into account should the ICC request of us their arrest and surrender. Basically, France is saying that Netanyahu is immune from arrest because Israel is not a signatory to the ICC, so they won't arrest him if he enters French territory. This is a break with the majority view in Europe. Most European nations have said that they will arrest Netanyahu and then let the ICC decide what to do with him. But France is not towing the European line, and it is using a strange excuse. It says Netanyahu is immune from arrest because Israel is not an ICC signatory, which is fine. It is true that Israel never signed on with the ICC. Multiple countries have not. India has not. The US has not. China hasn't. But the state of Palestine is an ICC member. So any crime in the Palestinian territories can be investigated by the ICC, and this includes the West Bank and Gaza. And this is why the Israeli leaders are being investigated. There's a legal debate around this, which I won't get into. I just want to highlight France's hypocrisy here, because last year the ICC had issued a similar warrant for Vladimir Putin. Now, Russia too is not a party to the ICC, but the warrant was issued for Putin's alleged crimes in Ukraine. Did France talk about immunity back then? Listen to their statement from the same French Foreign Ministry. This is about Putin. True to its long-standing commitment to combat impunity, France will continue to lend its support to the essential work of the international courts to ensure that those responsible for all the crimes committed in Ukraine are held accountable. They also said this: no one responsible for crimes committed by Russia in Ukraine, regardless of their status, should escape justice. So Paris was happy to champion accountability and justice when it came to Vladimir Putin, but when it's about Netanyahu, suddenly they care about immunity. It's another classic case of Western hypocrisy. Staying with France, hypocrisy is not their only problem. They're also dealing with public anger, especially from their farmers. French farmers have taken to the streets again. They're driving their tractors down various cities. They're dumping hay and manure outside government buildings. And they're also building walls, concrete walls, outside government offices. Now, this is a symbolic gesture to express their anger at an impending trade deal. This is a deal between Europe and South America. It's a free trade agreement. It has been in the works for 25 years. It would create one of the largest free trade zones in the world, but the French farmers are not happy about any of this. Our next report tells you why.
French farmers are out in full force. They have donned yellow beanies, boarded their tractors, and they're marching towards government buildings all over France. They are setting up camps outside some of the offices, building bonfires and cooking French sausages and sending that smell over to the government buildings nearby. Other offices aren't as lucky though. Some of the protesting farmers have brought other things with them, like hay and liquid manure. They're setting the hay ablaze and then dousing it with the manure. That also sends quite the smell into the government buildings, but of a very different kind. And the newest type of farmer protest took place in Paris outside France's National Research Institute for Agriculture, Food and Environment. The farmers brought concrete blocks with them and started building a wall outside the institute's gate. The farmers glued the blocks together and erected a wall that was almost 6 feet high. And then they spray painted this. It's a pun changing the word environment to scam, because that is what the French farmers feel. They feel they've been scammed by environmental regulations. Europe is on the verge of signing a deal with some South American countries. It's a free trade agreement between the European Union and Mercosur. Mercosur is a South American regional trade bloc comprising of Brazil, Argentina, Bolivia, Uruguay and Paraguay. The EU has been working on a deal with them for about 25 years. Negotiations began in the year 1999. And a draft deal was announced back in 2019. Mercosur is meeting next month on December 5th and 6th, and it hopes to finalize the deal. Most of Europe is on board. They want the deal to be done too. But France is a notable holdout because French farmers do not want this deal. French farmers believe a free trade agreement with South American nations will destroy their livelihoods. French farmers have been abiding by European agricultural standards. They are forbidden from using certain pesticides or growth hormones. This is to ensure the safety of European crops and meat and more natural and healthier produce. But that also makes them more expensive. So what happens when cheap pesticide and hormone-filled South American goods flood the European markets? How will farmers in France and the rest of Europe compete? A lot of them probably won't be able to, and that is why they are protesting. They feel the EU-Mercosur deal will destroy their industry. France is the EU's agricultural powerhouse. French farmers are responsible for about 1/5 of the bloc's agricultural output. So they will be hit the hardest by a free trade deal with Mercosur. That's why they are the ones protesting the most. The French government too wants to change the terms of the deal. French lawmakers from every party want changes to the agreement or scrap it altogether. But their hands are tied. It's not up to them alone. This is an EU-wide deal, so they will need support from other countries to block the agreement. So far, France has support from Poland, Austria and the Netherlands. But even then, they don't have the numbers to stop the deal. It could still go through. That is why the French farmers are resorting to ever more elaborate protests. They hope that by building enough pressure, their voices will be heard and the rest of Europe will notice their plight.
Can't live with them, can't live without them. This pretty much sums up Donald Trump's relationship with mainstream media, which has been fraught since his first term as US president. But even by those standards, his latest anti-media obsession stands out now that he is the president-elect. Trump wants to shake up the White House briefing room. That's what his son, Donald Trump Jr., has declared. That is Trump's eldest son. And like most white men with half an opinion, he has a podcast where, true to his name, Trump Jr. has triggered listeners. He claims that Trump wants to ban mainstream media from the White House press briefing room. They want to ban journalists and replace them with podcasters instead. So goodbye reporters, hello sympathetic influencers. After all, they helped him while much of the US mainstream media betrayed Donald Trump. They knew that Joe Biden was unfit to run again, but they played blind until the very end. Later, most of their coverage favored Kamala Harris, so journalists did not help their case either. Election results laid the fault lines bare, and now Trump wants revenge. But is this reason enough to shun the media, to restrict their access? And no, we are no US apologists, especially when it comes to their media. But this is all kinds of problematic because it points to a much bigger issue. The fact that the leader of a nation has declared that social media can replace mainstream media, that influencers can replace journalists. With each passing day, fewer Americans are trusting mainstream news anyway. In 1976, trust in media stood at 72%. Today, it is 31%. And this is part of a global trend. In Europe, only 29% people trust private media. In the UK, it is 36%. In India, it is 41%. So trusted news media is falling. Why? Mainly thanks to fake news and media bias, like the liberal bias in the US. So the repercussion is obvious. When people don't trust the media, they look for alternate sources of news. And influencers are filling this void. The world over, only 33% people get their news from mainstream media. More than 50% get it from social media, your TikTok and Instagram. These platforms are easy to access. They usually don't have a paywall. They make news consumption almost fun. So they do have their benefits. But we must say that the risks outweigh them. UNESCO has published new research. They say out of every 10 social media creators, 6 do not verify their information. 6 out of 10. 4 pick sources based on popularity and only 5 disclose their sponsors. Because unlike mainstream media, accuracy is not a priority on social media. Neither is the credibility of a source. Influencers do not need to attribute information. They aren't obligated to divulge the source of funding. Do you know why? Because more than a quarter of influencers don't even know about these regulations. Those who do, don't really have to pay heed to them because social media is like the wild, wild west. Its regulations are work in progress. So Donald Trump can be the new cowboy in town, but he should know that this helps no one. Yes, mainstream media has a lot to work on. Yes, the system is flawed. Yes, there is a crisis of credibility in news, but changing the definition of who is a journalist will only turbocharge it, not fix it. Rule number 1 of drinking, never drink and drive. Rule number 2 of drinking, never drink and use your phone. At best, you may drunk dial an ex. At worst, you may send a day's Thanksgiving address to your country. The internet says Kamala Harris has done the latter, that she released a drunk video message. So Harris has kept to herself after the elections, we know that. No major public appearances, no policy speeches. Her team says she's coping with the results. That could mean some downtime after weeks of intense campaigning. But the internet is convinced that Harris has taken to the bottle. They've even used artificial intelligence to drive home their point. Of course, we don't know what the truth is. But the video is not all that encouraging. If we were in Harris's team, we probably wouldn't have released it. But hey, what do we know? We did not raise $1 billion for campaigning, still end up in debt, and also lose the election. Anyway, take a look.
Ever let anybody take your power from you? You have the same power that you did before November 5th. And you have the same purpose that you did. And you have the same ability and to find the ability at this moment, to find the ability at this moment, to find the ability at this moment.
Cheers. Okay, cheers.
Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Ecuador, a plane drops from the sky like a stone, killing 2 people on a busy road. Several Indonesian neighborhoods remain underwater as flash floods hit Jakarta. And the Indian cricket team meets Australia's Prime Minister ahead of a practice match in Canberra. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1947, the UN General Assembly voted to partition Palestine. The plan was to divide it into 2 separate states, a Jewish state and an Arab state. This led to the creation of Israel in 1948. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.